I slammed the ledger shut, the dust of a century rising like a ghost in the dim parlor light. Grandfather Elias's handwriting stared back at me from the page, neat, unyielding strokes that ended abruptly on October 13, 1892. The date 3 Sterling men had simply ceased. My great-grandfather Harlan, my grandfather Elias, and now my father Theodore, all gone on that cursed autumn day, 100 years apart, as if the family blood called them to some unseen harvest. The clock on the mantel ticked louder than it should, marking the exact hour, 3:17 p.m. I, Samuel Sterling, the last of the line, felt the weight of it pressing on my chest. At 32, I'd inherited the old Ohio farmhouse not out of pride, but necessity. Debts mounting, whispers in town about the vanishing Sterlings, turning our name into a local legend. I wasn't one for superstitions. I'd built my life on ledgers and contracts, surveying land for the railroads creeping across the Midwest. But this? The dates aligned too perfectly, like a pattern carved by an invisible hand. Footsteps crunched on the gravel outside, pulling me from the desk. Through the lace curtains I saw her, Eliza, my cousin from the city side of the family, stepping down from a hired buggy. She'd wired last week saying she had papers from the family vault in Cleveland, something about Harlan's will that might explain the disappearances. Eliza was sharp as a surveyor's spike, with a wit that cut through fog but cautious to a fault. She'd never set foot in this house since we were kids, claiming it gave her the chills. She burst through the door without knocking, her wool skirt dusted with road grime, a leather satchel slung over her shoulder. "Sam, you look like you've seen a specter. Don't tell me you've been poring over those old journals again?" I forced a grin, though my pulse still hammered. Better than ignoring them. "Come in. I've got coffee on the stove. What did the vault cough up?" Eliza dropped the satchel on the table with a thud, her eyes scanning the room as if expecting shadows to move. She was brave in her way, tackling the city's legal battles as a clerk, but here in the creaking bones of the farmhouse, her caution showed in the way she hovered near the door. Harlan's original deed to this land, for one, and a letter he wrote the night before he vanished. Its cryptic talks about the vein running deep and a debt to the earth. But there's more. A map, hand-drawn, marking spots around the property. "Look." She unrolled the parchment, pinning it down with ink pots. The map showed our 200 acres, but with red lines snaking underground, converging on a point in the old apple orchard behind the barn. Symbols dotted the edges, strange angular marks that didn't match any survey I'd seen. My mind raced. Was this some mining claim from the coal rush? Ohio sat on veins of black gold, but Harlan had been a farmer, not a prospector. "October 13th, I muttered, tracing the date scribbled in the corner. He disappeared there in the orchard, according to the sheriff's report. Elias, too, a century later, chasing some light he saw at dusk. And father. Last year, same spot, same hour." Eliza's face paled, but she met my gaze steadily. "Coincidence is for fools, Sam. I've cross-checked the records each time the ground trembled faintly like a distant quake. No one else noticed, but the weather logs confirm it. What if it's not vanishings? What if it's something pulling them under?" Her words hung in the air, stirring the dust motes into a swirl. I thought of Father's last letter tucked in my pocket. "The roots remember. Sam, don't dig." But standing there with the map's lines mocking me, I felt a stubborn grit rise, sterling grit, the kind that tamed frontiers. "Then we dig. Tonight before the sun sets on another 13th. She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the map's edge, but nodded. "Fine, but we do it smart, no rushing in like Harlan. Tools from the barn, lanterns, and we mark our trail." As we stepped out into the fading light, the orchard loomed ahead, gnarled trees casting long shadows like accusing fingers. The air smelled of damp earth and overripe apples, and for the first time, I wondered if the family curse was just bad luck, or if the land itself hungered for its due. I gripped the edge of the kitchen table, my knuckles whitening as Elias's words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The lantern's flame flickered, casting long shadows across the scarred wood, and I could feel the weight of his gaze, steady and unyielding, as if he expected me to bolt right then. 3 generations, gone on the same autumn night, vanished without a trace, their fates intertwined by some cursed thread in our bloodline. Grandfather Elias had whispered the tale to me once years ago, when I was just a boy trailing after him in the fields, but I dismissed it as old man's fancy, the kind of story spun to keep idle hands busy. Now with father missing since dawn and the date marking that very anniversary, it clawed at me like thorns under skin. "Listen here, boy," Elias said, his voice gravelly from decades of shouting orders over harvest winds. He leaned forward, the lines on his face deepening like furrows in drought-cracked earth. "Your pa ain't one to wander off without a word, not with the mill waiting and the river rising. But I seen it before, the way the air thickens, the crows gathering like they're waiting for a feast. Your grandpappy disappeared first back in '52, leaving nothing but his boots by the creek. Then my own boy, your uncle, same night 20 years on. And now—" He trailed off, rubbing his calloused thumb over the silver locket at his neck, the one with mother's faded likeness inside. I pushed back from the table, the chair scraping loud against the floorboards, my heart pounding a rhythm that drowned out the distant hoot of an owl. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, blame the whiskey we'd shared earlier, but the chill seeping through the cracks in the walls felt too real, too insistent. The Sterling land had always been stubborn soil, yielding corn and sorrow in equal measure, but this was no flood or blight. I snatched my coat from the hook by the door, the wool heavy with the scent of damp earth. "Stay put, Elias, I'll check the mill myself." Probably just tangled in some rope or nursing a twisted ankle. He rose slowly, his joints protesting with a creak that mirrored the house itself, and placed a gnarled hand on my shoulder. It was firm, not pleading. Elias Sterling never pleaded. "Take the lantern, and mind the old oak by the bend. Shadows play tricks there after dusk." His eyes, sharp as a hawk's despite the years, held mine for a beat longer than comfortable. I nodded, stepping into the night where the moon hung low, bloated and indifferent, painting the path in silver streaks that did little to chase away the dark. The trail to the mill wound through the orchard, apple trees skeletal now in late October, their branches clawing at the sky. My boots crunched over fallen leaves, each step echoing my unease, and I couldn't shake the image Elias had painted earlier that evening. How the vanished ones were last seen arguing with phantoms, their voices carrying on the wind like echoes from a grave. Father had been restless all week, muttering about debts and dreams that wouldn't let him sleep but vanishing. I quickened my pace, the lantern swinging like a pendulum, its light bobbing over roots that seemed to twist just out of sight. As the mill came into view, its silhouette hulking against the river's murmur, a flicker caught my eye. A shape darting between the willows. I froze, breath catching, but it was gone, swallowed by the underbrush. Probably a fox, I told myself, or my mind playing the fool. Yet the air hummed with something off, a pressure building behind my eyes, and I wondered if this was how it started for them. A pull, invisible and insistent, drawing you toward the abyss. Shaking it off, I pushed open the mill door, the hinges wailing in protest, and called out Father's name into the gloom. Silence answered, thick and mocking, broken only by the steady drip of water from the wheel. I slammed the ledger shut, the dust motes swirling like ghosts in the dim lamplight of the Sterling attic. My fingers ached from hours of sifting through yellowed papers, but there it was, another date circled in faded ink. October 17th, 1892. Grandfather Elias gone without a trace on that very night, just like his father before him and his grandfather too. The pattern clawed at me, insistent, refusing to be coincidence. Downstairs, Cousin Amelia paced the parlor, her skirts whispering against the creaking floorboards. She'd insisted on coming, her sharp eyes missing nothing since we arrived at the old family homestead 2 days ago. Elias wasn't the type to vanish, she said, stopping to face me as I descended the stairs. He was methodical, buried in his ledgers like a mole. If he left, there'd be a note, a reason. I nodded, handing her the book. 3 generations' aims, all on the same date, same hour if the pocket watches are right. Elias's was stopped at 11:47 p.m., just like the stories say for the others. My voice caught, the weight of it pressing on my chest. I'd come here chasing inheritance papers, but now it felt like I'd unearthed a curse. What kind of bloodline swallows its own on command? She flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing. Look here, the entry before his disappearance. The vein runs deep. The silver calls, cryptic nonsense. And this map, tucked in the back. It's the old mine shafts under the hill. Her finger traced the inked lines leading to a spot marked with a crude X, miles from town. The idea hit me like a cold wind off the Ohio River. We'd dismissed the mine tales as local superstition, abandoned workings from the Silver Rush, collapsed and forgotten. But if Elias had gone there, We check it tonight, I said, grabbing my coat, before the sheriff pokes around and declares it another accident. Amelia hesitated, her cautious nature warring with the spark in her eyes. It's pitch black out there, and those tunnels are death traps. Flooded, unstable. What if? Then we take lanterns and rope. I'm not letting this eat at us like it did Mother. The words tumbled out harsher than I meant, but she saw the resolve in my face, the same grit Grandfather must have had. We rode out under a sliver of moon, the horses' hooves thudding against the dirt road like a heartbeat. The hill loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the stars, and as we neared the mine entrance, little more than a jagged maw boarded up with rotting timbers. Doubt gnawed at me. Why would Elias come here alone? But pushing the planks aside, the stale air rushed out, carrying a faint metallic tang that twisted my gut. Inside, our lanterns cast long shadows on the walls, the beam picking out rusted rails and scattered picks. Stay close, I whispered, tying the rope around my waist and hers. The ground sloped down, slick with moisture, and each step echoed too loudly as if the earth itself were listening. 20 minutes in, the tunnel narrowed, forcing us to crouch. Amelia's breath came quick behind me. This was a mistake. We should... A low rumble cut her off, the walls trembling like a beast stirring. Dust sifted from the ceiling, and ahead where the map's X should be, a faint glow flickered. Not our light, but something colder, bluish, pulsing like a heartbeat. My pulse thundered in my ears. Whatever had claimed the Sterlings, it wasn't done yet. I gripped the rusted latch of the Sterling family crypt, my fingers slick with evening dew, and yanked it open with a groan that echoed like a warning. Inside, the air hung thick and stale, laced with the faint rot of forgotten earth. Elias, my cousin with his perpetual squint of doubt, hovered behind me, lantern swinging in his hand. "This is madness, Theo," he muttered, his voice barely cutting the gloom. Grandfather's stories were just that, stories. 3 generations gone on All Hallows Eve. It's coincidence, not curse. I ignored him, stepping down the uneven stone stairs, the beam of light carving shadows that danced like specters on the walls. My heart pounded not from fear, but from the itch of unanswered questions that had driven me here, to this forgotten corner of the old cemetery outside Cleveland. Father had vanished 20 years ago on that same date, leaving only a cryptic note about the Bloodline's debt. Now, with Elias reluctantly in tow, I aimed to unearth the truth buried with our ancestors. The first slab I uncovered bore Elias Sterling's name. Gone in 1852, his epitaph a simple, "Taken by the night." No body, the record said. Just like the others, we worked in silence for what felt like hours, prying at lids and sifting through dust-choked ledgers tucked in alcoves. Elias coughed, waving away motes that swirled like angry spirits. "Look at this," he said finally, holding up a yellowed journal, its leather cover cracked like old skin. I leaned in, tracing the faded ink. Entries from 1832, our great-grandfather's hand, detailing strange lights in the woods behind the family farm, whispers that called names on the eve of November 1st. "They come for the eldest son," one line read, "to balance what was taken from the land." A chill unrelated to the damp air settled in my bones. This wasn't folklore. It was a pattern deliberate and hungry. I pocketed a loose page, my mind racing. Could it be some family secret? A debt to locals we'd wronged in the land grabs of the 40s. Elias snatched my arm as a low rumble shook the crypt, pebbles skittering from the ceiling. "Earthquake?" he whispered, but I knew better. It was the wind or something mimicking it, rattling the iron gate above. We bolted up the stairs, lantern flickering wildly, only to find the entrance sealed, not by lock but by a tangle of roots that hadn't been there before, thick as ropes and pulsing faintly in the dark. Panic clawed at Elias's face. He was the cautious one, always calculating risks back at the mill, not charging into crypts like me. "We're trapped," he hissed, pounding the barrier. I scanned the walls, spotting a narrow fissure near the back, our only shot. "Push through," I said, voice steady despite the tightening in my chest. "We came for answers. We won't leave without them." As we squeezed into the crevice, the rumble returned, closer now, and with it a voice. Not ours. Murmuring from the depths we'd left behind. It called my name, soft as a lover's promise, and I wondered if the Bloodline's debt was mine to pay after all. I gripped the rusted lantern tighter, its flame flickering like a heartbeat against the damp walls of the Sterling cellar. The air down here smelled of earth and forgotten cider. thick enough to chew, and every creak from the house above set my teeth on edge. Elias had sworn this was where Grandfather Harlan kept his journals, the ones that might explain why the date, October 13th, had claimed 3 generations of us. But as I scanned the shelves groaning under jars of preserves and cobweb-draped tools, doubt gnawed at me. What if this was just another dead end? Like the attic ledgers that promised secrets but delivered only tax tallies. Footsteps echoed from the stairs, soft but deliberate. I swung the lantern low, shadows dancing like thieves across the stone floor. "Who's there?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, laced with the grit of a man who'd spent too many nights chasing ghosts in his own bloodline. "It's me, Caleb," my sister Miriam whispered, descending the last step with a lantern of her own. Her face, pale in the yellow glow, carried that cautious furrow between her brows, the same one she'd worn since we were kids, always the one to pull me back from the river's edge. She clutched a worn leather satchel to her chest, her free hand trailing the wall for balance. I found something in Father's study. Not journals, but letters, sealed with that old crest, the one with the twisted oak. I straightened, the chill in my bones easing just a fraction. Miriam wasn't one for wild hunts. If she said it mattered, it did. "Hand them over." She passed the satchel, and I set my lantern on a barrel, fingers trembling as I broke the wax seal on the top envelope. The paper inside crackled like dry leaves, ink faded but legible. A correspondence from 1852, addressed to our great-uncle Josiah. "Dearest brother," it began, "the cycle turns again. Harlan vanished at dawn on the 13th, leaving only the mark on the oak. We must burn the roots before it claims another." My pulse quickened. The twisted oak. Father had mentioned it once, out back by the barn, its bark scarred in a way that looked deliberate, like runes carved by a madman. But burning roots, that sounded like superstition, the kind farmers whispered about crop blights or cursed land. I glanced at Miriam, her eyes wide, reflecting the flame. This can't be real. Poisons, rituals? Our family isn't. We're not witches or debtors fleeing in the night. She shook her head, stepping closer, her voice a urgent murmur. "It's not fleeing, Caleb. Read the next one." I unfolded the second letter, this from 1822, the handwriting spidier, as if penned in haste. "The bloodline demands tribute on the date of the founding. Josiah, the earth hungers for the eldest son." I saw it take Elias, swallowed whole by the soil beneath the oak. "Flee Ohio if you must, but tell no one." Swallowed whole. The words hit like a gut punch, conjuring images I'd buried since Father's disappearance last October. I'd found his boot at dawn, caked in mud, heel deep in the garden soil as if he'd been yanked down mid-stride. No body, no ransom, just that date etched into our calendar like a curse. And now, with my own birthday looming, October 12th, I felt the noose tightening. "Eldest son," that was me. Miriam's hand found my arm, steadying me as the lantern light wavered. "We dig tonight, under the oak. If there's truth to this, we end it before sunrise." Her caution cracked, replaced by a fierce glint I'd rarely seen. The brave streak she hid under quilts and quiet prayers. I nodded, folding the letters away. The cellar felt smaller now, the walls pressing in with the weight of secrets unearthed. But as we climbed the stairs, lantern flames merging into one defiant glow, I couldn't shake the whisper in my mind. What if the earth hungered not just for blood, but for all of us? I gripped the lantern tighter as the tunnel's mouth yawned before us, its jagged edges like teeth gnashing in the dim light. My cousin Harlan had insisted on this fool's errand, crawling into the old Sterling mineshaft beneath the family homestead, chasing whispers of a hidden ledger that might explain why Grandfather vanished on that cursed date, just like his father before him. "It's here, Elias," he'd said back at the farmhouse, his voice steady but his eyes flickering with that same doubt I felt twisting in my gut. Now, with the air growing thick and stale, doubt felt like a living thing slithering up my spine. We'd been descending for what felt like hours, the rope ladder fraying against my calloused palms. Harlan led, his broad shoulders blocking most of the light, while behind me young Theo, barely 16, all wide eyes and reckless curiosity, muttered prayers under his breath. The boy was my nephew, Harlan's son, dragged along because family sticks together in the dark, as my cousin put it. I wasn't so sure. The mine had been sealed since 1852, when great-grandfather Elias I disappeared without a trace, his lantern found smashed at the entrance. And now, 40 years later, on the eve of that same October date, here we were. 3 generations tempting fate. A low rumble echoed from deeper in, like stones shifting in their sleep. Harlan froze, his hand raised. "Hear that?" he whispered, turning his bearded face toward me. The lantern swung, casting shadows that danced like specters on the damp walls. I nodded, heart pounding against my ribs. We'd come for answers. The ledger supposedly held records of some family secret, a debt or a pact that bound us to this date. But the air hummed with something more primal, a pressure building as if the earth itself resented our intrusion. "Keep moving," I said, forcing my voice even. Cautious by nature, I'd argued against this at dawn, mapping safer paths through the homestead's attic records instead. But Harlan's grit won out. His stubborn belief that facing the dark head-on would break the cycle. Theo whimpered softly, and I shot him a look. "Steady, lad. We're Sterlings, we don't turn back." The tunnel narrowed, forcing us single file. My boots scraped against loose gravel, each step sending pebbles skittering into the void below. We'd rigged a secondary line for safety, but as I glanced down, the lantern light barely pierced the blackness, revealing only a fathomless drop. Memories flickered. Stories from my father of men lost in these shafts during the coal boom swallowed whole. What if the vanishings weren't coincidence, but this place claiming its due? Harlan's shout cut through the tension. "Elias, look here." He was ahead, kneeling by a splintered timber support. I scrambled forward, Theo close on my heels. In the lantern's glow, crude markings scarred the wood. Names etched deep. Elias Sterling, 1852. Thomas Sterling, 1822, and below, fresher but faded, Elias Sterling, 1892. My name. My blood ran cold. Who had carved that? Harlan traced it with trembling fingers. "It's a warning." Or a map. Before I could respond, the rumble returned, fiercer this time. Dust sifted from the ceiling like fine rain. Theo yelped, grabbing my arm. "Uncle, it's collapsing." The beam above Harlan groaned, cracking under invisible weight. He lunged back just as a chunk of rock plummeted, shattering against the floor where he'd knelt. The impact reverberated, shaking the walls, and a cascade of debris blocked the way forward. "Back, now!" I barked, shoving Theo toward the ladder. Harlan coughed through the dust cloud, his face smeared with grime, but he nodded, that wry smile cracking through. "Plan B, then. Your way. Papers and prayers." We retreated, the tunnel's breath hot on our necks, the weight of unseen eyes pressing in. As we climbed, the carved name burned in my mind. Whatever secret the mine guarded, it wasn't done with us yet. And tomorrow the date arrived. October 15th. If we didn't find the ledger another way, the Sterling line might end with a buried echo. I gripped the rusted lantern tighter, its flame flickering like a heartbeat in the damp air of the Sterling attic. Dust motes danced in the weak light, settling on faded ledgers and forgotten trunks that whispered of lives long buried. Elias, my cousin, knelt beside me, his fingers tracing the embossed initials on a leather-bound journal, E.S. 1852. "This is it," he muttered, voice low and edged with the caution that had kept him alive through 2 years of digging into family ghosts. The first vanishing. Not 1892, but 40 years earlier. We'd come here on a hunch after the whispers in town turned to outright stares. 3 generations gone on the same autumn night, October 13th, each leaving behind a trail of half-finished letters and blood-stained floorboards. My grandfather in 92, his father in 52, and now rumors of Elias's own kin in the war-torn 20s. The Sterling curse. They called it, but Elias believed it was no hex. Just secrets piled high like the crates around us. I was the skeptic, the one with the steady hands from years fixing machines in the mill. But even I felt the chill creeping up my spine as the floorboards creaked under our weight. He cracked the journal open, pages yellowed and brittle, smelling of old ink and regret. Entries scrawled in a hurried hand detailed shipments from the Ohio River. Cargo that wasn't cotton or coal, but something sharper, more forbidden. "Slaves?" I whispered, leaning in. Elias shook his head, eyes narrowing. "Worse, chemicals, niter, sulfur from the quarries up north." Grandfather's notes match this. Experiments in the basement, funded by men in Philadelphia who wanted black powder without the smoke of war. The attic seemed to shrink then, shadows lengthening as the lantern sputtered. Outside wind rattled the eaves like impatient fingers. We'd planned to catalog everything by dawn, slip out before the caretaker noticed, but Elias's face paled as he turned a page. A sketch rough but unmistakable. A device like a lantern but rigged with tubes and valves. labeled Vapor Inducer. Below it, a date, October 13th, 1852, and a single line. The mist took them. God forgive the ambition, my heart thudded. What mist? But before he could answer, a low groan echoed from below. Not wind this time, but wood shifting under strain. The house, built on uneven ground near the old riverbed, had always settled oddly. But this felt deliberate, like the earth itself was stirring. Elias snapped the journal shut, stuffing it into his satchel. We need to move. If this is what I think... A sharp crack split the air and the floor beneath us buckled. I lunged for the ladder, grabbing Elias's arm as crates tumbled, spilling yellowed photographs that fluttered like dying leaves. One caught my eye mid-fall, a family portrait. 3 men in stiff collars, their eyes hollow, dated 1892. We hit the hallway below in a heap, the impact jarring my teeth, but we scrambled up, breath ragged. The groan came again, closer from the walls now. Down the creaking stairs we fled, the journal clutched between us like a talisman. In the foyer, moonlit through cracked panes, Elias paused, his wit surfacing in the panic. Clever bastards, our ancestors, hiding explosives in plain sight, testing vapors that eat through stone. But why the same date? Some ritual trigger? I didn't answer, shoving open the front door to the cool night. The yard stretched dark and empty, but as we crossed the gravel path, a faint haze rose from the soil. Acrid, like sulfur mixed with rain. It wasn't fog. It clung, testing the air like a living thing. Elias coughed, waving it away. The river. It's seeping up. Whatever they buried, it's waking. We made it to the wagon, hearts pounding, but as I cracked the reins, doubt gnawed at me. The vanishings weren't curses or coincidences, they were echoes buried deep, and we just unearthed the first. 3 generations silenced, and now us racing the mist into the night, wondering if October 13th would claim the 4th. The lantern's glow faded behind us, but the journal's weight in my lap burned hotter than any flame. The lantern's flame flickered as I knelt in the damp earth of the Sterling cellar, my fingers tracing the carved symbols that snaked across the stone floor like veins in a dying body. They'd been hidden under layers of dust and forgotten crates, but Elias's journal had pointed me here, straight to the heart of whatever curse gripped this bloodline. My breath caught. The air tasted of iron and rot, and for a moment, I swore the symbols pulsed under my touch, warm as fresh spilled blood. I glanced up at Clara, her face pale in the dim light, clutching the old family Bible like a shield. She'd insisted on coming, her cautious nature warring with the fierce loyalty that had kept her digging through records when everyone else had given up. This can't be coincidence, she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. 3 generations gone on the autumn equinox. Your great-grandfather in 52, his son in 72, and now Elias last year. The same date, the same night. I nodded, wiping sweat from my brow, though the chill down here made no sense for sweat. My mind raced. Elias, my uncle, brave to a fault, had vanished without a trace, leaving only whispers of a family secret tied to this land. We'd come to the old homestead at dawn, driven by that journal entry. The mark calls on the turning. Beware the blood that binds. I'd laughed it off at first, chalking it up to his wit turning morbid in old age. But now, staring at these runes, Celtic maybe, or something older, the joke felt like a noose tightening. A low rumble shook the floor, dust sifting from the rafters like gray snow. Clara gasped, stepping back, but I grabbed her arm. Stay close. It's starting. The challenge wasn't some rival or storm. It was this house itself, the land hungry for its due, pulling at the Sterling line like roots seeking water. We'd planned to document, to photograph these marks before alerting the authorities, but that rumble said our time was up. The air thickened, pressing against my chest, and I felt it then, a pull deep in my bones as if the earth remembered my blood and wanted it back. We scrambled for the stairs, my boots slipping on the slick stone. Clara's wit cut through the panic. If this is what took Elias, he must have mouthed off one last time, probably told the house to go to hell. I forced a grin, but it died as the door above slammed shut on its own, the lock clicking with finality. Heart pounding, I shoved against it, solid oak, unyielding. The symbols below glowed faintly now, casting eerie shadows that danced like figures in a fever dream. Down here, with the rumble growing to a growl, I realized our early plan had backfired spectacularly. We'd thought coming prepared with tools, lights, even a stick of dynamite from the barn would give us the edge. But the dynamite was upstairs, and this trap felt designed for fools like us, descendants daring to unearth the past. Clara pounded on the door, calling out, but her voice echoed back hollow. I turned, scanning the walls for another way. Cracks, vents, anything. Nothing. Just the relentless pulse from the floor, syncing with my heartbeat. Think, Harlan, I muttered to myself, the internal churn of doubt creeping in. Brave? Maybe once, like Elias charging into bad deals with a laugh. But now, caution screamed to wait it out, to ration the lantern's oil. Clara met my eyes, her resolve mirroring mine. We adapt or we join them, she said, pulling a loose brick from the wall. Behind it, a small alcove, rusted tools, a forgotten pickaxe. Not much, but enough to start chipping at the stone. As we worked, the air grew heavier, whispers brushing my ears, names, dates, pleas from the vanished. The stakes hit hard, not just survival, but breaking the cycle before it claimed me, the last of the line. Sweat stung my eyes, but I swung the pickaxe harder, each strike a defiance. Clara wedged her Bible into a crack, prying with steady hands. The rumble paused, as if listening, and for the first time hope flickered. Not earned yet, but building, strike by gritty strike. The lantern's flame guttered in my hand as I pushed through the underbrush, the Sterling farmhouse looming like a forgotten tomb against the moonless sky. My boots sank into the mud, each step a reminder that Elias had been right. Chasing ghosts in the dead of night was folly, but turning back now felt like surrender. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and something sharper, like charred wood from a fire long extinguished. I clutched the faded journal tighter, its pages whispering accusations with every rustle. Elias trailed behind, his breath ragged, the weight of his rifle making his shoulders sag. "This is madness, Harlan," he muttered, swatting at a branch that clawed at his sleeve. 3 generations gone on All Hallows Eve, and you think a scrap of paper from Old Man Sterling's attic will unravel it? We've got the sheriff breathing down our necks for answers, not riddles. I didn't turn, couldn't afford to. The journal's last entry burned in my mind. The blood calls on the eve, pulling us under the hill. They come for the line, as they did for my father and his before. Nonsense, perhaps, but the dates align too perfectly. October 31st, 1842, 1872, and now 1892. My great-uncle, my father, and me all marked. Or was it coincidence? The farmhouse door creaked open under my shove, hinges screaming like a warning. Inside, dust motes danced in the faint light, settling on furniture frozen in time. A rocking chair sat empty by the hearth, its weave frayed where Grandfather Sterling's hands had gripped it last. I set the lantern on the mantel, shadows stretching long across the walls etched with family names. Sterling's back to the Mayflower's shadow. Elias barred the door behind us, his eyes darting to the windows. "If this is some family curse, Harlan, why drag me into it? I'm no kin to your vanishing act." "Because you're the only one who believed me when I said it wasn't fever dreams," I replied, flipping the journal open to the map sketched in faded ink. A twisting path from the farmhouse to the old Indian mound beyond the creek. Father's notes marked it as the heart of the pull. We'd come to test it, to dig if need be, before the eve claimed me too. But as I traced the lines, a chill seeped through the floorboards, not from the draft, but deeper, like the house itself exhaled. We moved to the kitchen, where the table still bore the imprint of a half-eaten meal from 20 years past. Father's doing, preserved in his paranoia. Elias rummaged for tools, pulling a rusted spade from the corner. Plan simple: follow the map to the mound, poke around, and if nothing, we burn this place and call it ghosts. His voice cracked on the last word, betraying the caution he'd worn like armor since we were boys. I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me. The eve was hours away, and already the whispers started, soft murmurs in the walls like voices from below. We stepped out the back, the creek's murmur guiding us through the fog-shrouded fields. The mound rose ahead, a hulking silhouette overgrown with briars, its crown crowned by a single twisted oak. As we climbed, thorns tore at my trousers, drawing blood that soaked the fabric warm and sticky. At the summit, the ground felt unnaturally soft, yielding underfoot like fresh grave soil. Elias thrust the spade in, grunting with effort. Clods flew, revealing nothing but roots at first. Then a glint, metal buried shallow. I knelt, brushing dirt away to uncover a locket, its chain snapped. Inside, a miniature portrait of my grandmother, her eyes staring out with a plea I couldn't ignore. "Harlan, look," Elias hissed, pointing downslope. Lantern light caught movement. Figures in the mist, shadowy and deliberate, circling the base like wolves. Not animals. Too upright, too purposeful. My heart hammered. The sheriff's men. Or something older, tied to the Bloodline's curse. We froze, spade forgotten. The whispers swelled, now clear. Sterling. Join us. Elias raised his rifle, but his hands shook. We should have stayed in town. This ain't ingenuity. It's a trap. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the oak. The map's final note. The heart bleeds true. With a pocket knife, I slashed my palm, letting blood drip onto the roots. The ground trembled, a low rumble building, and the figures halted as if waiting. Earned or not, this was our adaptation or our end. The eve pressed on, and the mound seemed to breathe with us. The lantern's flame guttered in the damp draft, casting jagged shadows across the cavern wall that seemed to pulse like a living thing. I gripped the pickaxe tighter, my knuckles white against the worn handle, as Clara's voice echoed from behind me, sharp and urgent. Elias, it's shifting again, listen. The low rumble started then, a growl from deep in the earth vibrating up through my boots and into my chest. We'd come too far to turn back now. Not with the Sterling journal clutched in my other hand, its pages whispering secrets of dates and disappearances that matched our own bloodline's curse. But as the first crack split the floor ahead, I realized our clever plan to brace the tunnel with timber scavenged from the old mill was unraveling faster than the rock itself. Tom cursed under his breath, shoving another beam into place with a grunt that betrayed his usual wit. This ain't no riddle we can talk our way out of. Elias. The whole ceiling's gonna drop if we don't. His words cut off as a chunk of limestone the size of a wagon wheel plummeted, smashing into the ground where Clara had stood seconds before. She stumbled back into me, her hand clutching my arm, eyes wide but steady. We'd argued all the way down here from the family farm, her caution clashing with my stubborn drive to end the vanishings that had claimed grandfather Elias in 62, father in 82, and now threatened us on this damned anniversary. We should have waited for more light, she'd said. But I knew waiting meant another year of ghosts haunting the Sterling name. The air thickened with dust, choking our breaths as we scrambled toward the narrow ledge that skirted the chasm. The journal had led us here to this forgotten vein beneath the Ohio hills. Speaking of a blood debt sealed in the earth, a mining accident from the family's founding, or so the faded ink claimed, where greed had buried men alive on the same date each cycle. I'd thought rigging explosives from the black powder in Father's old rifle case would blast open the sealed chamber and break the pattern. Human ingenuity, I'd called it to Tom over whiskey the night before, picturing us hauling out proof of the curse's origin, maybe even gold to rebuild the farm. But the blast had weakened the walls instead, turning our triumph into this trap. Over there! Tom pointed, his voice hoarse, to a fissure glowing faintly with what might have been bioluminescent moss or just wishful moonlight, filtering through a crack above. We moved as one, Clara first, her cautious steps testing each inch while I covered our rear, swinging the pickaxe at loose stones that threatened to cascade. My mind raced. Father's stories of the vanishings always ended with a final echoing cry from the fields, but this felt different. Personal. If we died here, the line ended, no clever adaptation to save us. A sharper tremor hit, and the ledge buckled under Tom's foot. He slipped, arms flailing, and I lunged, grabbing his wrist just as he teetered over the edge. The weight yanked me forward, my boots scraping for purchase on the crumbling edge. Clara whirled, looping her shawl around my waist like a lifeline and bracing against a jutting boulder. "Pull!" she shouted, and we heaved together, muscles burning, the journal tumbling from my grasp into the abyss below. Tom's face twisted in pain as he clawed up, his witty grin replaced by raw determination. We collapsed in a heap as the rumble faded, the cavern settling into uneasy silence. But the fissure ahead beckoned narrower now, and Clara's eyes met mine. Fear mingled with resolve. "We adapt or we join them," she said simply. No lecture, just truth. Pushing on, we squeezed through the gap, the walls pressing like a vice on my shoulders. The glow intensified, revealing etchings on the stone. Dates, names. Sterling, Sterling, Sterling. Carved in desperation by those who'd come before. My heart pounded. This was no mere cave-in. The air grew colder, carrying a faint metallic tang, and Tom's whisper cut the tension. "Elias, you smell that? Like blood and ore." I nodded, the pieces clicking. The bloodline wasn't metaphor. Grandfather's accident hadn't been chance. Something in this vein demanded tribute on that date, pulling the family back like a magnet. We emerged into a wider chamber, the floor littered with rusted tools and skeletal remains half buried in glittering quartz. In the center, a crude altar of fused rock held a vein of crimson ore, pulsing faintly in the lantern light. Clara knelt, tracing the carvings, her caution giving way to awe. It's real. The debt. It's this metal, cursed or alive, calling us. I stepped closer, the pickaxe heavy in my hand, knowing one swing could shatter it or doom us. But Tom's hand on my shoulder steadied me. Together, then. No lone heroics. As we raised the tool in unison, the earth groaned once more, but this time it felt like release. A final test of our grit. The strike rang out, chips flying, and the crimson vein cracked, spilling not blood but a rush of cool air from below. Light filtered in, not from above, but from a hidden spring, washing away the dust. We'd broken something, but at what cost? The journal was lost, and with it full proof. Yet as we climbed toward the surface, supporting each other, the weight on my chest lifted. The vanishings might end, but the Sterling name carried scars now, hours earned in the dark. I gripped the rusted latch on the attic door, my knuckles whitening as the wood creaked under the strain. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill seeping through the floorboards of the old Sterling farmhouse. 3 generations gone on the same autumn night. Grandfather Elias in 1852, Father Harlan in 1872, and now me, Elias Jr., staring down the barrel of 1892 like it was a loaded rifle. The family ledger lay open on the desk below, its pages whispering of patterns I couldn't ignore. The vanishings always at midnight on October 15th. No bodies, no traces. Just echoes in the wind. My lantern flickered as I hauled myself up the ladder, boots scraping against the splintered rungs. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten secrets, moth-eaten quilts draped over crates like shrouds. I'd come here after the lawyer's visit that morning, his voice droning about inheritance taxes while my mind raced. If the pattern held, tonight was the night. I wasn't running. No, I'd face it. Armed with Father's old revolver tucked in my belt and a notebook full of scribbled theories, curses, debts to shadowy creditors, or worse, some family sin buried in the soil of this cursed land. A shadow shifted in the corner, or so I thought, my heart pounding like a blacksmith's hammer. "Who's there?" I called, voice steadier than I felt. Silence answered, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. I edged forward. Beam of light cutting through the gloom, illuminating a trunk I'd never noticed before. Brass bound, engraved with the Sterling crest, a silver eagle clutching a blood-red gem. My fingers trembled as I pried it open, hinges protesting like a dying breath. Inside lay letters, yellowed and brittle, tied with faded ribbon. The top one bore Mother's handwriting. "Elias, if you read this, run. The blood calls on the 15th. It took your father. It'll take you." My throat tightened. Mother had died in childbirth, or so we'd been told, but now doubt clawed at me. I scanned the pages. Accounts of midnight meetings in the woods, whispers of a pact made in 1820 with men from the river docks, promising prosperity for the Sterlings in exchange for... What? The words blurred. 1 soul per generation delivered whole. Footsteps echoed below, heavy and deliberate on the stairs. Not the wind this time. I shoved the letters into my coat, revolver half-drawn, pulse thundering in my ears. "Harlan?" I whispered, though Father had vanished 20 years ago. The attic door below slammed open, and a voice, a gruff, familiar yet warped, called up. "Elias, you up there, boy? Time's come." I froze, peering through a crack in the floorboards. A figure stood in the lamplight, tall and broad-shouldered, face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. But the limp, that telltale hitch from a logging accident, was Father's. Impossible. The notebook slipped from my pocket, pages fluttering down like fallen leaves. He looked up, eyes gleaming. "Knew you'd dig it out. The Bloodline's debt ain't paid yet." Adrenaline surged. I bolted for the small window at the attic's end, glass shattering under my elbow as I tumbled out onto the sloped roof. Shingles slid underfoot, the night air biting cold. Below, the figure emerged from the house, moving with unnatural speed toward the barn. I dropped to the ground, rolling into the tall grass, revolver now in hand. The date loomed, October 15th, minutes to midnight. If the letters were true, I had to break the cycle. Find whatever altar or marker they hid in the family lore. Darting through the orchard, branches whipping my face, I headed for the old well behind the property. The one grandfather sealed after his own vanishing. Legend said it was a gateway, fed by underground springs that carried more than water. My mind raced, the gem in the crest, blood red like rubies from the river traders. Was that the key? A sacrifice to seal the deal? The well loomed, a black maw circled by crumbling stones, weeds choking the edges. I knelt, prying at the boarded cover with my knife, splinters digging into my palms. Voices murmured from the depths, faint and overlapping. Grandfather's stern tone, father's laugh, even a child's cry that might have been mine. Midnight struck, the church bell tolling in town, and the ground trembled. The figure, father, appeared at the tree line, flanked by two others, translucent as mist. Ghosts or something worse, summoned by the pact? "Join us, son," he said, voice echoing unnaturally. "The prosperity awaits below." I fired a warning shot into the dirt, the crack splitting the night. They didn't flinch. Desperation clawed. I slashed my palm on the well's edge, blood dripping into the darkness. "Take this instead," I shouted, hurling the ribbon-tied letters after it. A howl rose from the well, wind whipping fierce, pulling at my coat like greedy hands. The figures wavered, father's form solidifying for a heartbeat, regret in his eyes before dissolving into smoke. The trembling stopped, leaving only silence and the metallic tang of blood on my tongue. I slumped against the stones, revolver heavy in my lap. The debt broken, maybe, but at what cost? Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the orchard gold. But the Sterling house felt emptier than ever, its shadows longer. As I bandaged my hand and gathered the scattered pages, a new weight settled. The bloodline endured but twisted now. Whispers lingered in my mind, promising that the 15th would call. I gripped the rusted latch of the Sterling attic door, my knuckles white against the splintered wood. Dust motes swirled in the lantern's flicker as I heaved it open, the hinges screaming like a warning I couldn't heed. Below, Elias's voice echoed up from the parlor, sharp and insistent. "You find anything up there, Harlan? We're running out of time, the clock's striking 11. My heart pounded. Each beat a reminder of the date, October 17th, the same cursed night that had claimed grandfather Elias in 1852, father in 1872, and now threatened us all. I'd come to the old Sterling homestead not as a skeptic, but as the last thread in this unraveling bloodline, driven by letters yellowed with secrets and a map etched in father's hand. The attic smelled of mildew and forgotten ink, shelves sagging under crates of journals that whispered of patterns. Vanishings tied to the harvest moon, always at midnight. I swept the lantern across the beams, shadows dancing like specters. There, tucked behind a stack of moth-eaten linens, was the trunk. Brass bound, engraved with the family crest, a Sterling eagle, wings clipped. My fingers trembled as I pried the lid, revealing not gold or heirlooms, but a leather-bound ledger, its pages brittle. Elias's great-grandfather had written it, detailing a pact, not with devils, but with the land itself. The Sterlings had drained the Ohio soil for their mill, stripping it bare until the earth rebelled, claiming one heir per generation on this night to reclaim its due. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun, lantern swinging, to see Clara silhouetted in the doorway. Her eyes, wide and fierce, held the caution that had kept her alive through 2 prior hunts for truth. "Harlan, the wind's picking up outside. It's like the storm from the stories, the one that swallowed your father whole." She was no fragile bystander. Her wit had pieced together the clues from county records, arguing against my reckless dives into the family lore. How she clutched a small vial of soil from the mill's ruins, her plan to break the cycle. I nodded, passing her the ledger. "It's not ghosts, Clara, it's the ground. They fed it blood, wounds from the harvest scythe, accidental at first, then ritual. Grandfather cut his hand on this date, vanished into the fields. Father followed suit. The words tasted like ash. Our challenge wasn't some rival or machine failure. It was the earth itself, starved and vengeful, pulling us under if we didn't offer recompense." She scanned the pages, her brow furrowing. "Then we give it something else. The vial, rich soil from untouched woods mixed with our blood, but willingly. No vanishing, just renewal." Her voice cracked, not from fear, but the weight of choosing for us all. Elias pounded up the stairs then, his brave frame filling the threshold, sweat beading on his weathered face. At 60, he was the anchor, the one who'd survived by hiding the truth, but tonight his grit shone through. The mill's groaning like it's alive. If we don't act, it'll drag us all. We descended as one, the ledger under my arm, vial in Clara's hand. The parlor clock loomed, its hands creeping toward 12. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows like bones. I led them to the hearth where Father had last stood, pricking his palm before the fog rolled in. "We adapt," I muttered, my internal resolve hardening. No speeches, just action. Slice the skin, mix the drops with the soil, and bury it at the threshold. But as Elias struck the match to seal the vial's contents, a tremor shook the house. The floorboards buckled, dirt clawing up through cracks like fingers. Clara gasped, steadying herself on my shoulder, her wit flashing. Not enough, it's hungry for the old way. The stakes twisted sharper. One wrong move and we'd join the vanished. 3 generations plus 2 more lost to Ohio's unforgiving claim. I dropped to my knees, digging with bare hands, the earth cold and insistent against my skin. Elias joined, his breaths ragged, while Clara poured the mixture. The tremor peaked, a low roar building, but we pressed on. Teamwork forged in the attic's dim light, our choices etching a new path. As the clock told midnight, the ground stilled, accepting the offering. Yet in the silence I felt the consequence linger. The mill would stand empty, our bloodline's greed ended, but the soil's memory etched forever in the scars on our palms. I gripped the lantern tighter, its flame flickering like a heartbeat against the damp stone walls of the Sterling crypt. The air down here was thick, laced with the scent of earth and decay, but it was the silence that clawed at me most, the kind that swallowed sounds before they could echo. Elias had gone ahead, his broad shoulders vanishing around the last bend in the tunnel, muttering about patterns in the dates like they held the key to everything. I followed, my boots scraping softly, each step a reminder that we'd come too far to turn back now. "Keep up, Harlan," Elias called from the darkness, his voice low but steady, the way it always was when he was piecing together one of his theories. He was the cautious one, the miller who'd spent years poring over family ledgers, convinced the vanishings weren't accidents or fevers, but something deliberate, tied to that cursed date in October. 3 generations. Grandfather Elias in 1852, father in 1872, and now, 20 years on, the weight of it pressing on us like an unseen hand. I wasn't so sure. I was the brave fool, the one who'd volunteered to dig up the old well behind the house after the dream started. But here we were in the family vault beneath the chapel ruins, chasing ghosts. The tunnel opened into a chamber, rough-hewn and forgotten, where roots snaked through cracks in the ceiling like veins. Elias knelt by a slab of granite etched with faded names, Sterling's all, but none from our line after father. He traced the dates with his fingers, his face illuminated in the lantern's glow, shadows carving deep lines around his eyes. "See this? October 15th every time. Not coincidence. It's a cycle, Harlan. Blood calls to blood." I set the lantern down, its light pooling on the floor like spilled ink, and crouched beside him. My hands trembled, not from cold but from the memory of that night 2 weeks ago, when I'd woken to the sound of footsteps in the empty house, only to find the front door ajar and a single autumn leaf on the threshold. Elias had found the hidden map then, tucked in Father's Bible, leading us here. "If it's a cycle, how do we break it?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. We were brothers bound by this legacy, but his certainty, grated sometimes, made me feel like the reckless younger one chasing shadows. He didn't answer right away, instead prying at the slab's edge with a crowbar we'd smuggled in. It gave with a groan, revealing a hollow beneath, not bones but a leather-bound journal, brittle and dust-caked. Elias lifted it carefully, blowing away the grime, and we both leaned in as he opened it. Pages yellowed with age, ink faded but legible, entries from grandfather, detailing visions of a gathering on the hill, whispers from the earth promising fortune if the family paid the toll. October 15th. The date stared back at us like an accusation. A low rumble shook the chamber then, dust sifting from above. I grabbed Elias's arm. "The tunnel. It's collapsing." We'd known the risks. The chapel had stood abandoned since the war, its foundations weakened by floods, but this felt deliberate, the ground shifting under us as if the earth itself resented our intrusion. Elias stuffed the journal into his coat, his face paling but resolute. "We go back the way we came. No time for plans." We scrambled up, the lantern swinging wildly, casting jagged shadows that danced like pursuers. Rocks tumbled behind us, the rumble growing to a roar, sealing off the chamber we'd left. My breath came in gasps, heart pounding against my ribs. Brave Harlan reduced to this, fleeing into the dark with my brother. Elias led, his caution turning to urgency, shouting directions over the din. "Left at the fork, watch your step." We burst into the main crypt just as the tunnel mouth caved in fully, a cloud of debris choking the air. Coughing, we staggered out through the iron grate above ground, the October night cold and starless. The journal was safe in Elias's hands, its secrets ours now. But as we caught our breath by the chapel's crumbling wall, I saw the cost, a gash across his forehead, blood trickling like the family line we'd nearly lost. And in the distance the hill loomed, waiting for its due on the 15th, tomorrow. We'd survived the crypt, but the real vanishing was just beginning. The lantern's flame flickered against the damp stone walls of the Sterling crypt, casting shadows that danced like the ghosts we'd come to unearth. My hands, raw from clawing through centuries of dirt and deceit, gripped the final ledger. Elias Sterling's own hand, scrawled in ink that smelled faintly of blood and regret. Beside me, Clara knelt, her breath steady despite the chill that seeped into our bones, while Thomas paced the narrow aisle, his boots echoing like accusations in the confined space. "We've got it," I whispered, my voice hoarse from hours of silence broken only by the creak of the iron gate we'd forced open. The date stared back at us. October 13th, etched not just in records but in the rhythm of their lives. Grandfather, father, and now, if the pattern held, me. 3 generations vanished on the same midnight, leaving whispers of madness or murder in their wake. But this wasn't sorcery or some Ohio folklore curse. It was greed, plain and festering. Clara's fingers traced the yellowed page, her eyes sharp as she pieced it together. The mine collapse in '52 wasn't an accident. Your great-grandfather rigged the supports to bury the evidence. Stolen silver veins he'd claimed for himself. The workers who knew too much? They disappeared first, blamed on cave-ins. Then Elias, covering his tracks, vanished the family ledger here under the family plot, to keep the secret buried with him. Thomas stopped pacing, his face paling in the dim light. He'd been the skeptic, the one who'd laughed off my letters from Cleveland, calling it a fool's errand when I dragged him and Clara out here from the city. But now his jaw tightened, fists clenching. "And your father? He found this place, didn't he?" Tried to expose it, thinking it was justice. But the town's elders, descendants of those old partners, they silenced him. Made it look like he wandered off, same as the rest. I nodded, the weight of it settling like the earth above us. My own dreams had started months ago, flashes of tunnels collapsing, voices calling from the dark, pulling me back to this forgotten corner of Ohio. I'd thought it madness, a Bloodline's echo, until Clara's research in the county archives uncovered the pattern. And Thomas, ever the engineer, mapped the old mine shaft snaking beneath the Sterling farm. We'd come alone, no authorities. Trust was a luxury we couldn't afford. Not when half the town still whispered of the curse to keep prying eyes away. The plan had nearly unraveled twice. First when the storm hit last night, flooding the access tunnel we'd dug, forcing us to swim through muck that tasted of iron and oblivion. Thomas had pulled me out, cursing under his breath, his usual wit drowned in exhaustion. Then this morning, old man Hargrove, Elias's nephew, still clinging to the family name, had spotted our lantern from the hilltop. He'd come at us with a shotgun, ranting about desecrating graves, but Clara's quick thinking with the chloroform rag we'd brought for just such a betrayal had dropped him cold. We'd tied him in the farmhouse, his keys now unlocking this crypt's secrets. Now with the ledger in hand, I felt the noose of history loosen but not snap. "We burn it," I said, striking a match. The flame caught the edges, curling the paper into ash that swirled up toward the vented ceiling. Clara nodded, her hand finding mine, steady, unyielding, while Thomas gathered the scattered deeds and maps, stuffing them into his satchel. No triumph, just the quiet grind of truth unearthed. We emerged into the pre-dawn gray, the air thick with the scent of turned soil and distant rain. The farm loomed silent, its fields barren since my father's time, but as we trudged toward the wagon, I glanced back at the crypt's yawning mouth. Hargrove would wake soon, and with him the town's old guard. They'd come for us, spin their tales of vanishings renewed. We'd ride for Cincinnati by first light, the evidence safe enough to bring charges that would crack their facade wide open. But in the quiet of my mind, as the horses' hooves clipped the gravel road, I wondered if the date would claim me still, not in disappearance, but in the endless chase. Clara squeezed my hand, Thomas muttering about reinforcements, and for the first time the bloodline felt less like a chain and more like a spark. We'd broken the cycle, or so I told myself, even as the horizon bled red with the coming day. October 13th had passed unmarked this year, but its shadow lingered, a reminder that some debts outlive the grave.